The human outpost sat at the very edge of colonized space. It was small, lonely, and quiet, little more than a cluster of metal domes, antenna towers, and a single defense platform orbiting high above the barren planet. Most of the galaxy had forgotten this place even existed. To many in the Human Expansion Directorate, it was a dead-end post, a punishment assignment. But for the few who lived there, the outpost was home. Commander Elias Rourke stood at the command deck window, watching the stars beyond the black horizon. The planet below was dusty, almost lifeless, its weak atmosphere barely thick enough for survival domes. It was a harsh world, but it had one advantage. It sat at a crossroads between human space and the unmapped frontier. Trade vessels sometimes passed near, scouts came and went, and the outpost's job was simple: watch, listen, and report. 4 years, nothing unusual had happened. The biggest excitement in the last decade had been a solar flare that fried half their long-range scanners. Life was routine, quiet, almost boring. That night, however, everything changed. It started with a faint sound, barely a flicker on the comms panel. Ensign Mara Velasquez, the youngest officer on duty, leaned forward in her chair and frowned. "Commander, I've got something strange," she said. Rourke turned. "Strange how?" "It's a signal. Weak. Broken up. I can't get a full lock." She tapped the controls, and a burst of static filled the speakers. Beneath it, something, like a voice, or perhaps mechanical noise, echoed faintly. The entire command deck went still. Signals were rare out here. Human ships followed strict lanes. They always identified themselves. This was different. "Is it one of ours?" Rourke asked. Velasquez shook her head. "Negative, sir. Wrong modulation. Wrong coding. It's not human." The silence that followed was heavy. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the signal cut off. Before anyone could react, the lights above flickered. Consoles blinked off, then back on. The outpost's main scanner array let out a low hum before crashing completely. "What the hell?" Chief Engineer Kaito swore as his console sparked. The grid just spiked. "I've never seen that happen before." Rourke frowned. "Was it caused by the signal?" Kaito shook his head. "No. At least, not directly. But it's almost like something interfered with the power relays. Something external." Velasquez looked up from her station, pale. "Sir, the long-range comms are down." "Jammed. Jammed." Rourke repeated. "Yes, sir. Artificial interference." A cold knot formed in Rourke's stomach. In all his years of service, he had never heard those words spoken outside of wargames. Artificial jamming meant only one thing: someone didn't want them calling for help. Alarms blared. The orbital defense platform reported multiple contacts emerging from the void. "Commander!" Velasquez cried. "I'm reading ships. Unknown class. Multiple signatures. They just came out of FTL." Rourke's jaw tightened. "How many?" "Dozens, sir. Maybe more. They're spreading into orbit, surrounding us." The command deck filled with a heavy silence. Every officer felt the same realization at once. This wasn't a passing scout. This wasn't a random encounter. This was an invasion. The outpost had only one orbital defense platform, a single railgun array, more a deterrent than a weapon of war. Its job was to scare off pirates, not stand against a fleet. The ground defenses were little better: some bunkers, turrets, and a garrison of a few hundred soldiers. Against a full-scale alien force, it was hopeless. And yet, as the alien fleet took up positions above the planet, the humans on the outpost did something unexpected. They did not panic. Commander Rourke turned to his officers, his face calm, his voice steady. "Lock down all civilian sections. Seal the domes. Move everyone to secure shelters." "Yes, sir." "Kaito, get me emergency power to all scanners. I want to know exactly what's above us." "On it." Velasquez, Keep listening. If they send a message, I want it on speakers immediately." The crew snapped into motion. Their fear was real, it was written in their eyes, but discipline kept them moving. This was the human way. When faced with the impossible, you prepared anyway. Minutes later, the scanners flickered back online, grainy but functional. The display filled with red contacts. Alien ships, sharp and angular, unlike anything in the human database, circled the planet like vultures. The first transmission came seconds later. It was not a voice meant for human ears. Harsh, metallic, echoing. Yet the translation system worked enough to give it words. "This outpost belongs to the dominion of Zir. Humans, surrender your station. Lay down weapons. You will be spared." The alien commander's voice dripped with arrogance, with certainty. Velasquez looked to Rourke. "What do we do, sir?" Rourke did not hesitate. "We do nothing. Let them wait. Sir. If they think we're afraid, they'll press harder. If they think we're desperate, they'll crush us quickly. No. We will say nothing. We hold." The alien fleet hovered above, patient at first. Hours passed. The outpost lay silent, its defense platform aimed upward, its shields flickering weakly. Soldiers gathered in the bunkers. Families huddled in shelters. Fear crept through the halls, but still, no one broke. Then, without warning, the first alien dropships appeared on the scanners. "They're coming down," Velasquez whispered. "Multiple transports inbound. Estimated 200 troops, maybe more." Rourke stared at the display. He felt the weight of what was coming. He knew the truth. The outpost could not hold against a direct assault. Not for long. But humans had a way of surviving the impossible. They always had. He looked at his officers and gave the only order that mattered. "Prepare to meet them." The alien dropships cut through the atmosphere like knives, streaks of fire against the dark sky. Sirens blared across the outpost as civilians ducked deeper into shelters and soldiers manned their posts. Turrets turned. Railguns charged. Mines were armed. From the control deck, Rourke watched the alien vessels descend onto the barren plain just beyond the domes. Dust swirled in their wake as they landed in formation. Hatches opened. And for the first time, humans saw their enemy. They were tall, armored, with insect-like visors and segmented plating that glistened under the weak sun. Their weapons pulsed with blue energy, crackling with power. They moved with confidence, their posture almost casual, as if this battle was already won. Velasquez whispered, "Sir, there are too many." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Then they'll be easier to find." The aliens advanced toward the human outpost, their steps shaking the ground. Weapons ready, voices echoing through their comms. They expected surrender. They expected fear. Instead, the humans waited in silence. Turrets locked. Mines armed. Every soldier at the ready. Commander Rourke's voice echoed across the intercom. "They think this outpost will fall quickly. Let's show them what happens when you corner humanity." And then, as the first alien soldier crossed the invisible line into human territory, the battlefield came alive. The battlefield exploded in fire. Mines buried beneath the sand erupted, throwing alien soldiers into the air. Hidden turrets unfolded from the domes of the outpost, spitting streams of high-velocity rounds. The first wave of attackers never even raised their weapons. They were cut down before their boots touched the human perimeter. The aliens screamed through their comms, their strange voices full of shock. They had expected civilians, a weak militia, maybe a handful of guards. Instead, they found a kill zone. The plane became a furnace of dust, smoke, and fire. Commander Rourke stood at the command deck, watching the tactical screen light up with red markers flashing out one after another. His officers shouted over the chaos. Velasquez reported enemy positions, Kaito rerouted power to the turrets, and gunners called in every strike. But even as the first wave fell, more dropships streaked down from orbit. Their engines roared as they slammed into the dirt and disgorged fresh soldiers, armored and ready. They charged, firing blue bolts of energy that tore chunks out of the ground. The defense platform above fired once. The railgun's shot screamed through the void and smashed into a descending transport. The ship tore apart mid-air, raining burning wreckage across the desert floor. The aliens below didn't flinch. They kept advancing. Inside the bunkers, human soldiers held steady. Plasma blasts hammered their walls, shaking the earth, but they fired back with grim precision. Each shot was deliberate. Each strike was meant to kill. The outpost defenders were outnumbered, but they fought like they had nothing left to lose. The aliens breached the first outer wall. Explosions rocked the defenses as a section collapsed, and a squad of alien warriors poured through. But they found more than rubble. Human Marines, waiting in the shadows, opened fire at point-blank range. Grenades exploded among the invaders, tearing their armored suits apart. Screams echoed across the comms. Velasquez gripped her console. "They're inside the perimeter." Rourke's voice was calm. "Seal the breach. Collapse it if you have to." Seconds later, demolition charges set by retreating Marines detonated. The wall came down, crushing aliens under tons of debris. The line held. In orbit, the alien flagship observed the slaughter with growing unease. Their commander, a figure shrouded in bone-like armor, snarled orders to his subordinates. He could not understand how a single human outpost, so small and so isolated, could resist the Dominion's finest troops. This was supposed to be a quick victory, a message to humanity that resistance was hopeless. Yet already, dozens of his soldiers lay dead, their bodies littering the sand. Still, arrogance kept him from doubt. He ordered more troops down. Twice as many. They would burn the outpost to ash. The humans saw the fresh wave incoming. Dozens of transports descended together, darkening the sky. The soldiers in the bunkers braced for impact, checking ammo, whispering to themselves, gripping weapons so tightly their knuckles went white. Some prayed. Others grinned. When the dropships touched down, the desert shook. Hundreds of armored aliens marched forward in unison, their weapons glowing with deadly light. The defenders knew this was the real assault. The first clashes were brutal. Plasma blasts ripped through turrets. Human artillery answered, blasting entire squads into the air. The ground burned with fire and metal. Still, the aliens came. Their numbers pressed in, their formation closing around the human walls. Inside the outpost, families huddled deep in the shelters. The sound of explosions shook the walls, but none of them screamed. They knew panic would not save them. They trusted the soldiers above to fight, to hold, to survive. At the command deck, Velasquez's voice trembled as she spoke. "Sir, their numbers, there are too many." Rourke did not look away from the screen. "There are never too many. Every one of them bleeds. Every one of them dies." The alien soldiers reached the main gates. They unleashed volleys of plasma that melted steel. The gates glowed red, groaning under the assault. Marines lined up behind it, rifles aimed, grenades ready. Then the gate shattered. Aliens stormed inside, roaring in triumph. But the humans were waiting. The narrow corridor funneled the invaders into a killing ground. Crossfire shredded them. Explosives turned the passage into a furnace. When the smoke cleared, the gates were choked with alien corpses, stacked high like a wall of their own dead. The survivors outside hesitated. That hesitation was their undoing. Human snipers, hidden across the rooftops, picked them off one by one. The advance faltered. The outpost still stood. In orbit, the alien commander slammed his claws against his throne. Dozens of his troops gone, erased as if they were nothing. He demanded answers, demanded explanations. His officers muttered about human traps, human cunning, human ruthlessness. The commander dismissed it all. It was impossible, he told himself. These were mere colonists. They could not fight like this. And yet, they did. The second wave was broken just like the first. The plain outside the outpost was a graveyard of metal and flesh, scorched black by fire. Smoke rose into the sky, blotting out the stars. But the humans knew it was not over. They had survived 2 waves, but the fleet above had not moved. More would come. Stronger. Rourke stood silently, watching the display. His officers looked to him, waiting for orders, waiting for reassurance. He gave them none. He didn't need to. The outpost was still alive. That was enough. Hours passed. The battlefield outside grew quiet. No new ships landed. The humans waited, tense, wondering if the enemy had given up. But deep down, they knew the truth. The Dominion would never leave survivors. Velasquez broke the silence. "Commander, do you think they'll stop?" Rourke finally turned, his eyes cold. "No. They'll send more. They'll send everything. And we'll kill them all." The lights flickered again. The scanners glitched. The jamming grew stronger. Then, in the black sky above, fresh signatures appeared. Bigger ships this time. More dropships than before. Thousands of soldiers, waiting to descend. The Dominion was no longer testing the humans. This time, they meant to crush them completely. In the shelters, the civilians heard the rumble of engines above, and knew the battle was not finished. In the bunkers, Marines tightened their armor straps and reloaded magazines, whispering to each other that this was the end, or the beginning of something greater. The 3rd wave was coming. The biggest yet. And the outpost, scarred and battered, prepared to meet it. The sky turned red as the dropships fell. The sky was alive with fire. Dozens of alien dropships cut through the atmosphere at once, their black hulls glowing red from the friction. They fell in formation, a dark swarm against the thin clouds, their engines screaming like thunder. Every human on the outpost heard them. Every soldier felt the ground tremble as the invasion force descended. Commander Rourke stood at the command deck, his arms folded, his jaw set. His officers watched the tactical screen as red blips multiplied across it, far more than before. Velasquez swallowed hard. "They're committing everything, sir. Thousands. Maybe more. They think numbers will save them," Rourke said quietly. "It won't." The civilians in the shelters huddled together as the roar of engines grew louder. Children buried their faces in their parents' arms. Marines checked their rifles, loaded grenades, and whispered final words to each other. Some laughed to hide the fear. Others sat silent, their eyes fixed on the walls, listening to the growing storm. The first dropships tore across the horizon, blotting out the sun. They came down in waves, hundreds of them, their shadows stretching across the desert floor. Dust and fire rose as they landed in tight formations, one after another, until the plain outside the outpost was covered with alien transports. Hatches opened. The ground shook with the weight of armored boots. The Dominion's army marched out in endless lines, their weapons glowing with cold blue light. Their ranks moved in perfect order, rows of soldiers stretching as far as the eye could see. Velasquez whispered, almost to herself, "It's too many." Rourke did not answer. He simply watched. The alien commander's voice boomed across the comms again, full of contempt. "Humans, surrender. You cannot resist. Lay down your arms, and you may be spared." Rourke turned toward the comms officer. "Do not answer." The alien voice came again, harsher this time. "Defiance will bring extinction." Still, the humans said nothing. Then the alien army began its march. Their boots thundered against the ground, each step perfectly timed, a living wall of steel and fire advancing on the outpost. The air itself seemed to tremble with their numbers. From the shelters, civilians heard the rhythm of war approaching, steady and unbroken, like a drumbeat of doom. Inside the bunkers, Marines raised their rifles, eyes on the firing slits. Gunners tightened their grips on mounted weapons. The defense platform above locked its sights on the nearest transport, ready to fire. But before the humans could open fire, something happened. The first line of alien soldiers reached the halfway point to the outpost, and then their signals blinked off the scanners. Velasquez leaned forward, confused. Sir, their transponders just vanished. Kaito frowned. What do you mean, vanished? Malfunction. Velasquez shook her head. No, sir. They were there. Then they were gone. Completely. Like they never existed. On the plain, the alien army continued its march. Thousands of armored figures pressed forward, weapons raised, formation perfect. But on the tactical screen, red blips flickered and disappeared one by one. Hundreds, then thousands. Whole squads erased in seconds. Rourke narrowed his eyes. He didn't understand it either. But he knew one thing. Something was happening out there, something the aliens weren't prepared for. The alien commander in orbit barked orders, demanding reports from his ground forces. His officers scrambled, sending calls through every channel. None were answered. Static was all that came back. On the surface, the Dominion troops kept moving. But to the humans watching through scopes and scanners, something strange was clear. Their steps faltered. Their formation broke. Rows collapsed as soldiers vanished mid-stride. One moment they were there, the next, gone. No explosions. No smoke. Just silence. Velasquez's hands shook on her console. Sir, they're disappearing. Not retreating. Not dying. Just gone. The alien fleet above erupted in chaos. Ships shifted position, comms channels flooded with demands for answers. Still, no one on the ground responded. Rourke gave a thin smile. He didn't know what force had awoken on this barren world, but he knew one thing. It wasn't human weakness. It was something else. Something the aliens had walked straight into. Outside, the desert plain was eerily quiet now. Dust swirled in the wind. The massive army that had marched with such thunderous force was gone, as if the planet itself had swallowed them whole. Only broken dropships remained, their hatches wide open, empty. Velasquez's voice was barely above a whisper. Sir, there were thousands of them. And now, nothing. Rourke's gaze stayed on the plain. Then let the galaxy remember what happened here. They came for us. And they vanished. In orbit, the alien commander's fury boiled over. His claws ripped gouges into the armrest of his throne as he screamed orders. More troops. More ships. Burn the outpost to the ground. But his officers hesitated now. Fear had crept into their voices. Fear of something they could not explain. The Dominion was powerful. They were ruthless. But they had never faced the unknown like this. The humans in the shelters did not know exactly what had happened outside. But when the rumblings stopped, when the distant marching fell silent, hope sparked in their eyes. Whispers spread. The aliens were gone. The enemy had failed again. Yet Rourke knew better. This was not the end. The Dominion would not retreat after 2 failed assaults. No. They would come harder. They would send more. They would try to erase this outpost from the stars. And when they did, they would discover a truth written in blood and silence. No one leaves a human outpost alive. The calm that settled over the outpost was thin, fragile, like the quiet before a storm. Smoke still rose from the battlefield. Wreckage still burned. The air was heavy with the stench of ash and scorched metal. But the enemy was gone. Thousands of soldiers, wiped from existence without a trace. The outpost had survived again. And the galaxy had just begun to learn why humanity could never be broken. The outpost lay in silence after the vanishing. Dust still swirled in the wind, carrying the faint smell of smoke and burnt metal. The battlefield outside was empty now, littered with wrecked dropships and charred craters, but not a single alien soldier remained. Inside the command deck, no one spoke at first. The crew stared at the screens, at the empty plane, at the red markers that had blinked out one by one. The silence was heavier than the gunfire had ever been. Finally, Velasquez broke it, her voice low, almost trembling. Commander, how do thousands of soldiers just disappear? Rourke didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the display, watching for movement, scanning for anything left alive. His mind replayed the march of that army, the precision of their lines, the arrogance in their voices, and then the sudden, impossible silence that swallowed them whole. Kaito muttered, "It wasn't us. Our guns didn't do that. Our minds didn't do that. Something else, something on this world, ate them alive." The words hung in the air. No one dared agree, but no one argued either. Above, the Dominion fleet was in chaos. Comms channels screamed with confusion. Officers demanded answers. Their commander shouted for reports that never came. Their scanners saw the same thing the humans did, an empty battlefield where thousands should have stood. At last, the alien fleet moved again. New dropships broke away, larger this time, heavily armored, bristling with weapons. The Dominion was finished testing. Now they meant to overwhelm, to crush, to burn everything to ash. Velasquez's console beeped sharply. "Incoming. Multiple waves. Sir, this is their real push." Rourke's voice was calm, steady. "Then we'll make this their last push." The humans did not know what had erased the second wave. But they did know their own traps were waiting. The plain outside the outpost wasn't just dirt and dust. For years, engineers had hidden layers of defenses beneath it. Minefields buried deep, remote turrets concealed under rock, drones sleeping in hidden caverns. The Dominion thought this was a lonely station. They thought it weak. They had no idea the outpost was built for one purpose only, to draw invaders into a grave. The first of the new dropships slammed down. Their armored hulls hissed as they cooled, massive ramps dropping into the dust. Waves of soldiers marched out, taller and broader than the ones before, their armor black with extra plating, their weapons glowing with high-energy charges. The second dropship landed beside the first, then a third, then dozens more, until the horizon was filled with their hulking shapes. Their lines were endless. From the shelters deep below, civilians listened as the earth shook again. Children pressed their ears to the walls, hearing the thundering march above. Mothers whispered for them to stay quiet. Fathers held their breath. Everyone knew this was the moment that decided everything. Rourke watched the tactical feed as the enemy advanced, and this time, the red markers did not vanish. They were real. They were coming. The first line of Dominion troops entered the mine zone. The ground erupted. Explosions ripped through their formation, tearing armored soldiers into pieces. Their screams filled the comms. But unlike the second wave, these troops did not break. They pressed forward, stepping over the bodies of their fallen. Hidden turrets burst from the sand, swiveling and firing streams of slugs into their ranks. Rows collapsed, bodies torn apart, but still they came. Energy bolts hammered the turrets, ripping them apart one by one. Turret sectors falling. Velasquez shouted. "Let them fall," Rourke said. His voice was like stone. "It isn't the turrets that will kill them." The aliens pushed closer, their weapons glowing as they fired at the walls. The bunkers shook with each hit. But then, from beneath the battlefield, a new sound rose, a deep rumble, like machines waking from a long sleep. The ground split open. From hidden silos and buried shafts, human war drones launched into the sky. Black metal shapes, armed with rockets and cannons, shrieked upward and then dove straight into the alien ranks. Explosions lit the desert. Alien formations broke as fire and shrapnel consumed them. From the shelters, the ground seemed to quake like an earthquake. Civilians clung to each other, praying silently as the world above roared with fire. Alien screams filled the comms once more. Some called for retreat. Others shouted to hold formation. But the trap kept unfolding. Beneath the battlefield, more charges detonated, collapsing tunnels that aliens had dug for cover. Entire squads were buried alive, their signals blinking out as tons of rock crushed them. Automated turrets hidden inside the walls themselves turned on, firing from new angles. The aliens who thought they had breached safety were cut down in seconds. Rourke's eyes never left the display. He saw red marker after red marker fade, whole units erased, their push slowing, then faltering. Still, the Dominion kept coming. Their arrogance had turned into desperation. They sent more transports, more soldiers, filling the plane with endless waves. But the humans had prepared for endless waves. At the command deck, Kaito pulled up a final control. His face was pale, but his hands were steady. "Sir, if I trigger this, there won't be anything left standing out there." Rourke nodded once. "Trigger it." Kaito's hand came down. For a moment, nothing happened. The alien soldiers shouted in triumph, believing the humans had finally run out of tricks. They charged the final stretch, hundreds of them, screaming war cries. Then the ground gave way. The entire plane collapsed. Beneath it lay not solid rock, but caverns packed with fuel and charges placed years ago. The Dominion army fell into a pit of fire. Explosions tore upward in waves, rolling across the desert like a living storm. Dropships were thrown into the air and shattered. Soldiers burned, their armor melting, their voices cut off mid-scream. The blast was so bright it blinded the scanners. For several minutes, no one could see anything but fire. When the smoke cleared, the battlefield was gone. The once flat plain was now a cratered wasteland, burning with scattered flames. Of the Dominion's massive army, nothing remained. The humans inside the outpost did not cheer. They only stared in silence, listening to the crackle of flames on the comms. Velasquez whispered, "Dear God." Rourke finally allowed himself a long breath. His voice was quiet, but steady. "That's the cost of coming here." In orbit, the Dominion fleet was silent. Their commander watched the destruction unfold, his soldiers erased in a single fiery moment. For the first time, doubt crept into his eyes. This was supposed to be simple. A weak outpost. A show of power. But now, thousands of his warriors were gone, their bodies ash on the wind. And the humans still stood. The survivors in the shelters emerged slowly, cautiously. They stepped out into the broken air and looked at the wasteland beyond their walls. Where once the Dominion had marched in endless rows, only smoking craters remained. The children looked up at the soldiers who guarded them, eyes wide with awe. The Marines said nothing. They only reloaded, checked their weapons, and returned to their posts. Because they knew the truth, this wasn't over. The Dominion had not given up. And when they struck again, it would be with fury unlike anything the humans had seen before. But for now, the outpost still stood. Scarred, burning, but unbroken. And the galaxy had just learned that humanity's weakest post was not weak at all. It was a trap. The Dominion flagship was silent. On the bridge, rows of officers stared at their displays, but no one spoke. The battlefield below had become a furnace. Thousands of their soldiers had been swallowed in fire, their signals erased all at once. The commander's claws tightened on the railing until the metal groaned under his grip. His army, his elite warriors, gone like dust in the wind. "How?" he growled at last, his voice low and dangerous. "How does a single human outpost consume legions?" None of his officers dared answer. Their scanners told them the truth. There were no survivors on the surface. The humans had turned the ground itself into a weapon. On the human side, the outpost was battered but alive. Smoke leaked from cracked walls, systems flickered from overload, but the soldiers inside still stood at their stations. Rourke walked the deck slowly, inspecting every console, every face. His crew looked exhausted, eyes heavy, but steady. "Status," he said. Velasquez scanned her screen. Defensive turrets destroyed. Minefields exhausted. Drone count down to 15%. But the walls hold. Shields are stable. "And the Dominion?" Rourke asked. Kaito's lips curved in a grim smile. Confused. Angry. Scared. Indeed, the alien fleet above was no longer moving with confidence. Their formations shifted erratically, ships circling like predators unsure of their prey. Their comms buzzed with frantic chatter, fragments of words the humans intercepted. Words like impossible, mass casualties, and unknown weapon. In the shelters below, civilians emerged into the dim light of the ruined sky. They walked among the charred craters, their faces pale as they looked at what remained of the battlefield. Children clung to their parents, whispering, "Did the soldiers do this?" One of the Marines knelt to their level, his armor still scorched from battle. He did not smile. He simply said, "No alien walks away from this ground. That's all you need to know." Back in orbit, the Dominion commander's rage finally broke through his silence. He slammed his claws against the console, sparks flying. Humans. They are animals. Fragile, weak animals. And yet, his voice cracked, disbelief mixing with fury. They slaughtered my army as if it were nothing. One of his officers finally spoke, voice shaking. "Perhaps, Commander, perhaps we underestimated them." The words struck the bridge like a curse. The commander's eyes burned. Underestimated. His voice was venom. They are prey. They bleed. They break. They die. And I will show the galaxy that no human can defy the Dominion. His fury could not hide the truth. The soldiers around him avoided his gaze. They had seen what happened. They had watched their comrades vanish, their war machines torn apart by traps no scanner had detected. They had seen courage in human eyes where they expected fear. The first cracks in their belief had appeared. Inside the outpost, Rourke gathered his officers. The command deck was lit only by emergency lights, flickering softly. He looked at each of them, his face calm but lined with fatigue. "They'll strike again," he said. "Harder. Desperation will drive them. That's when mistakes happen." Velasquez frowned. "Sir, what if they bring their capital ship weapons? One blast could shatter us." Rourke nodded. "If they fire, they risk destroying what they came for. This outpost guards a gate, an access point to our colonies. They want it. They won't scorch it yet." Kaito leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "So we hold. We bleed them until they realize what this outpost really means." "And what does it mean?" Velasquez asked quietly. Rourke's gaze hardened. "It means this: humans do not break. They came here expecting an easy kill. They'll leave remembering a graveyard." Above, the Dominion commander paced. His rage twisted into something darker, fear he refused to name. He sent orders for more ships to descend, for artillery to be deployed, for every weapon at their disposal to be unleashed. But deep inside, his mind whispered what his pride would not let him admit. Nothing had gone as expected. The Dominion soldiers felt it too. In the barracks aboard the fleet, warriors whispered among themselves. They spoke of the plane that swallowed armies, of fire that came from the ground itself, of humans who stood calm in the face of annihilation. Some tried to laugh, to mock, but their laughter was brittle, hollow. Others stayed silent, staring at the floor, wondering if they were next. On the surface, night fell. The desert was quiet now, lit only by the glow of burning wrecks. The humans repaired what they could. Engineers welded broken panels, soldiers patrolled the walls, medics treated the wounded. But even in exhaustion, they moved with purpose. In one of the shelters, a child looked up at a soldier and asked, "Why aren't you scared?" The soldier crouched, removing his helmet. His face was streaked with dirt and blood, his eyes weary but steady. "Because fear doesn't save lives," he said softly. "But standing does." The child didn't fully understand. But he nodded anyway, and for the first time since the attack began, he smiled. High above, the Dominion commander gave his final order of the night. "Prepare the next assault. At dawn, the humans will know the full weight of the Dominion." But as his officers bowed, none of them truly believed it. Because the humans had already shown them something the Dominion had never seen before. Not just strength. Not just weapons. But defiance. And the silence of the battlefield whispered a truth the Dominion could not erase. This outpost was no hunting ground. It was a tomb. Dawn came like fire. The first beams of light stretched over the desert, cutting across broken plains littered with burned machines and charred alien bodies. The outpost stood in silence, its walls scarred, its turrets crippled, but its people still alive. Soldiers watched the horizon with tired eyes, rifles gripped tight. Civilians huddled in shelters, waiting for the sound they dreaded, the thunder of war returning. It came. The ground trembled first. A low, distant rumble, like a storm crawling over the horizon. Then the sky split open. The Dominion fleet descended, blotting out the morning sun. Hundreds of ships filled the air, their hulls glinting like blades of obsidian. Engines roared. Bombardment began. The first blasts struck the sand around the outpost, hurling walls of fire into the sky. The shockwaves tore through dunes, flattening what remained of the battlefield. Soldiers inside the outpost were thrown to the ground, alarms screaming. Shields at 60%. Velasquez shouted over the roar. Sparks rained from her console as the systems groaned under the assault. "Hold them steady," Rourke barked, gripping the railing. His eyes narrowed as the display showed the swarm of enemy signals above. "This is it. They'll give everything now." From orbit, the Dominion commander watched his forces fall like a hammer. Artillery platforms ignited the desert, dropships spilled warriors by the thousands, and dreadnoughts charged their main cannons. His lips curled in a snarl. No human stands after this. Crush them. Erase them. The desert turned into chaos. Alien soldiers swarmed across the ground, their armor shining in the dawn. They marched in endless ranks, weapons flashing, vehicles thundering forward with seismic force. Energy fire streaked across the sands, slamming into the outpost walls. Inside, the humans fought back with what little they had left. Machine guns roared from shattered turrets, pouring fire into the advancing troops. Drones shot from launch bays, weaving through enemy lines, exploding in brilliant flashes. Snipers on the walls picked off commanders, dropping them one by one. But the storm was too great. A blast from an alien tank ripped a hole into the outer barrier. Dust and fire swallowed a squad of Marines as they scrambled to plug the breach. Medics dragged the wounded back, their faces pale with exhaustion. "Commander, breaches on the east and south walls." Kaito yelled, his hands flying over the console. "We can't hold all sides at once." Rourke's jaw tightened. "Then we make them pay for every inch they take." He turned to the comms officer. "Patch me through to all squads." The channel crackled alive, filling with the static of battle. Rourke's voice cut through, hard and steady. "Listen to me. They're throwing everything at us now. This is the weight of an empire. But this is not their world. This is ours. They think humans break under pressure. Show them we do not bend, we do not bow, and we do not die quietly. Hold your ground." A chorus of voices answered, some shouting, some whispering, but all resolute, "Hold the ground." The battle raged on. On the south wall, a squad of Dominion warriors breached through, snarling as they fired into the human defenders. A Marine sergeant charged forward with a plasma grenade, diving into their ranks with a roar. The explosion shook the air, and when the smoke cleared, the breach was sealed with fire and bodies. On the east wall, engineers scrambled to reinforce collapsing shields, welding new plates as artillery fire hammered around them. One engineer, bloodied but grinning, shouted, "If this thing falls, it'll fall welded together." Inside the shelters, civilians prayed, their voices trembling. A child covered her ears as the ground shook. Her mother whispered, "The soldiers will protect us. The soldiers always protect us." But even she did not know if it was true. Above, the Dominion commander leaned forward on his throne-like chair, eyes blazing. "Why do they still resist? Why do they not fall?" He slammed a fist into the console. "Press harder." His officers obeyed, though unease filled the air. They had seen this before, waves of their brothers erased by human cunning. Now they watched as even the full fury of the Dominion seemed slowed, delayed, resisted. The outpost burned. Walls crumbled, turrets fell silent one after another, and smoke filled the air. But still the humans stood. Kaito slammed a fist against his console. "We're at 30% shields, Commander. Another barrage and we're finished." Rourke's eyes narrowed as he stared at the battlefield map. His mind raced. He had one last card to play. "Ready the last reserves," he said quietly. Velasquez looked at him in shock. "Sir, that's all we have left. If we use them now, they'll break if we don't," Rourke cut her off. His voice was calm, cold, unshakable. "This outpost wasn't built to survive. It was built to bleed the Dominion. We've done it all night. We'll do it again now." The reserves were released. Hidden bunkers beneath the outpost opened, and heavy cannons rose into the light of dawn. Their barrels glowed red as they powered up, targeting the largest enemy ships in the sky. Fire! The cannons unleashed a storm. Beams of light screamed upward, cutting through the haze, tearing into alien cruisers. One ship exploded in a ball of fire, its wreckage raining down on the desert. Another split in half, its engines bursting like suns. The Dominion fleet reeled back. Warriors on the ground froze as their skies burned with the destruction of their own ships. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent, the shock spreading like a wave. Then the humans roared. Soldiers cheered, firing harder, pressing forward against the invaders who faltered. The defenders' eyes blazed with fire, their voices rising in unison. The Dominion commander's face twisted in disbelief. "Impossible, again?" His claws dug into the chair. His pride screamed for vengeance, but his heart whispered a truth he could not silence. The humans were not prey. They were predators. Yet the assault was not over. The Dominion still had numbers, still had weapons, still had rage. The commander stood, his voice a thunderous roar. "Drive them into the dust. I want nothing left standing." And so the dawn became a furnace once more. The ground shook as both sides clashed with everything they had left. The outpost, half in ruins, became the heart of the storm. Smoke choked the air. Fire lit the sky. Human blood spilled, alien bodies piled, and still the walls stood. In the command center, Rourke stood tall, staring at the chaos, his voice low but steady. "Let them come. Every alien that steps onto this ground dies here. By the end of this day, not one will leave alive." And outside, as if the desert itself heard him, the battle answered with thunder. The desert reeked of smoke and blood. 4 hours, the Dominion had hurled their full strength against the human outpost. The sun climbed higher, glaring down on the battlefield as if watching a cruel play unfold. The sand was blackened by fire, churned into ash and glass. Alien bodies lay scattered in heaps, their armor twisted and broken. But the humans still stood. Inside the battered walls, soldiers reloaded rifles with trembling hands. Their faces were pale, their uniforms burned, but their eyes carried the same fire. Medics moved among the wounded, whispering promises that not everyone believed. The command center shook with each impact, but its screens still glowed with battle data. Kaito rubbed his bloodshot eyes, his voice hoarse. "Commander, their casualties are massive. I don't know how, but we're still holding. Somehow, we're still here." Rourke's expression was carved from stone. He leaned on the railing, watching as red markers, the enemy, flooded the map. Yet, for the first time, the tide had slowed. Velasquez leaned forward at her console. "Sir, I'm picking up hesitation. Their ground forces aren't pushing as hard. Their formations are breaking." She turned, disbelief in her eyes. "They're stalling. Stalling." Rourke muttered, his voice low. "Or losing their nerve." On the battlefield, alien commanders barked orders, but their troops faltered. They had marched with certainty at dawn, confident that the humans would crumble. Now they stepped over the bodies of their own fallen, staring at the walls that refused to fall. Whispers spread among them. Quiet, fearful words that no one dared say aloud. "The humans do not break." In orbit, the Dominion commander slammed his claw against the arm of his chair. The sound echoed across the bridge, but his crew remained silent. Their eyes avoided his. For the first time, the great warlord saw doubt in their faces. "How dare they resist us this long?" he roared. His voice cracked with rage, but beneath it, something darker crept in, doubt of his own. He turned to his fleet. "Order every remaining ship to prepare another strike. If the ground fails, the sky will burn them out." But his second-in-command hesitated. "Warlord, our losses are already severe. If we throw the fleet again and fail—" "Silence!" The warlord spat, his fangs bared. "This is the Dominion. We do not fail." Yet his claws trembled where no one could see. Back on the ground, the humans pushed. Sergeant Hale led his squad through the breach at the south wall. Smoke stung their eyes as they stormed across the sand, rifles blazing. They moved like predators, silent, fast, merciless. Alien warriors fell in droves, their advance collapsing under the sudden counterattack. "Push them back!" Hale shouted, his voice ragged. "Make them choke on their own dead." The Marines roared, surging forward. Each step cost blood, but the aliens faltered more with every human charge. For every Marine that fell, 10 aliens scattered. Velasquez's voice cut through the command center. "Commander, their formations are collapsing. They're pulling back from the eastern flank." Rourke's jaw tightened. His voice was calm, but inside his chest, his heart pounded like a drum. "Don't let up. Make them believe there's nowhere safe. Drive it into their skulls. This planet kills them." The humans did just that. Grenades lit the battlefield, drones strafed from above, and artillery thundered with every last shell they had. The Dominion soldiers, once fearless, once relentless, now stumbled. Their eyes darted to the skies, to their commanders, to the corpses piling at their feet. And then, it happened. One alien squad broke. Their weapons clattered to the ground as they fled into the smoke. Another squad followed. The panic spread like fire through dry grass. Orders screamed from their commanders went unanswered. The once mighty Dominion advance fractured, then shattered. Kaito's voice trembled. "They're retreating." The command center fell silent for a heartbeat. No one moved. No one spoke. The word seemed too unreal, too heavy to believe. Then the cheering began. Soldiers on the walls raised their rifles, screaming into the smoke. Wounded Marines pounded their fists against the ground. Even the civilians in the shelters wept, clutching each other as the sound of retreating footsteps filled the air. "They're running!" Hale's squad shouted, laughter breaking through their exhaustion. "The bastards are running!" Velasquez turned to Rourke, her voice breaking. "Sir, we did it. We actually—" "Not yet," Rourke cut her off sharply. His eyes were cold, sharp, unyielding. "This isn't victory. Not until the last of them is gone." Outside the walls, the desert echoed with chaos. Alien warriors shoved past each other, retreating toward their landing craft. Commanders tried to rally them, but fear had already taken root. Their empire had promised them an easy kill. Instead, they had found death waiting in human hands. On his ship, the Dominion warlord stared at the collapsing battlefield. His pride screamed for him to descend, to tear the humans apart with his own claws. But his instincts screamed louder. If he stayed, he too might never leave. He turned, his voice low, venomous. "Signal the fleet. Begin withdrawal." His officers froze. "Withdrawal? My lord, the Dominion never—" "Do it," he snapped, his eyes burning with humiliation. "This world is cursed. Not a single one of us will leave it alive if we stay." One by one, Dominion ships began to pull away from orbit. Engines flared as the massive fleet turned, retreating into the void. The humans watched from the ground, disbelief written across their faces. The sky that had burned with enemy fire now glittered with retreating engines. Kaito sank into his chair, laughing weakly. "They're leaving. They're actually leaving." Velasquez covered her mouth, tears in her eyes. "It's over. We survived." But Rourke stood in silence, his gaze locked on the retreating fleet. His expression was not relief. It was suspicion. His voice was quiet, a whisper only to himself. "No, it's not over. Not yet." Because deep in his bones, he felt it. The Dominion had tasted human defiance, and they would not forgive it. The retreat was not the end. It was only the beginning of something far worse. And above, hidden among the retreating ships, one massive shadow lingered. A warship unlike any seen before. Its hull pulsed with a sickly red glow, its weapons humming with unnatural power. It did not retreat with the others. It waited. Watching. Preparing. The humans below cheered, thinking victory was theirs. But the sky still held a storm yet to break. The silence after the retreat was strange. Smoke curled over the battlefield, carrying the stench of burned metal and blood. For the first time in hours, the guns stopped firing. The desert wind howled through broken walls. Marines slumped against rubble, their eyes wide with disbelief. Civilians wept openly in the shelters. "They're gone," Sergeant Hale whispered. His rifle hung loosely in his hand. "The bastards are finally gone." But Commander Rourke did not move from the command platform. His gaze stayed fixed on the sky. Velasquez followed his stare. At first, she saw nothing but stars and the faint glow of retreating ships. But then she saw it. A shadow. It lingered above the planet like a predator circling wounded prey. Larger than any Dominion ship they had faced, its hull shimmered with red light. Dozens of gun ports yawned open, glowing brighter as energy charged within. Her voice shook. "Commander, one ship didn't leave." Kaito's console screamed with alarms. It's huge. Power readings are off the charts. That's no ordinary warship. That's something else." Rourke's jaw tightened. The Dominion kept their executioner in reserve. The skies lit up. The alien warship fired its first volley, beams of crimson that seared across the heavens and hammered into the outpost. Shields flared, walls cracked, and soldiers screamed as the ground buckled beneath their boots. "Brace for impact!" Velasquez shouted. The desert exploded. Entire defense towers toppled. The walls cracked wide open. It was as if the Dominion wanted to erase the very land, not just the humans standing on it. Panic rippled through the outpost. Some soldiers faltered, their courage finally cracking at the sight of the behemoth above. "We can't fight that," one Marine cried. "We don't have anything left." But Rourke's voice cut through the fear like steel. "We don't run. We don't surrender. Not here. Not now. We finish this." His words spread like fire through the comms. Exhausted soldiers lifted their rifles again. Artillery crews loaded their last shells. Pilots dragged themselves into battered fighters that should no longer fly. Civilians handed spare ammo to the front lines, refusing to hide any longer. The outpost, broken, bloodied, nearly gone, stood once more. The alien warship descended lower, its shadow swallowing the desert. Sergeant Hale spat in the sand. "Let's give them hell." The battle began. The Dominion unleashed storms of fire. Red beams carved across the desert, vaporizing trenches, melting bunkers, and tearing holes through the ground itself. But the humans fought back. Rockets screamed into the sky, streaking toward the giant ship. Some were shredded by point defense fire, but others slammed home, bursting against its armor and rocking its massive frame. The Marines on the ground fired everything they had left, pouring their fury into the sky. Drones swarmed upward, tiny sparks of light darting against the vast shadow. Many were swatted from the sky instantly. But some pierced through, delivering payloads of explosives that peppered the warship's underbelly. "Direct hits," Kaito shouted, though his voice cracked with strain. "Minimal damage, but we're hurting it." Velasquez snapped, "Minimal isn't good enough. We need critical." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll make critical." In the chaos, Hale's squad regrouped at the southern wall, what was left of it. Their weapons burned hot, barrels glowing red, but they didn't stop. "Focus fire," Hale bellowed. "Make it bleed." Above them, the warship roared with alien fury. Its hull split open, revealing a massive superweapon, a cannon the size of a city block, glowing brighter than a star. Kaito's face went pale. If that fires, the entire outpost is gone. For a heartbeat, silence fell. Everyone knew what it meant. The last card. The Dominion would erase them in one shot. But Rourke's voice broke through. Calm. Commanding. "Then we don't give them the chance." Velasquez turned, eyes wide. "Sir. We hit it with everything. Everything left. Right now." The order went out. The outpost came alive in a storm of fire. Every gun, every cannon, every drone, every fighter launched at once. The desert sky turned into a blazing storm of rockets and plasma. The Dominion warship's hull shook violently as explosions ripped across its surface. Armor plates shattered, engines flared. But the cannon kept charging. The glow grew brighter. The hum turned into a scream. The ground trembled with the energy building above. And then, a single human fighter, half broken, engines sputtering, rose higher than the rest. Its pilot's voice crackled over comms, steady and calm. "This is Eagle 7. I've got one last run in me." Velasquez's eyes widened. "Who is that?" Kaito checked the roster, his hands shaking. "Lieutenant Reyes. He shouldn't even be flying, his fighters falling apart." On the screen, the fighter streaked upward, dodging beams of fire, weaving through explosions. Reyes pushed his craft harder than it was ever meant to go, climbing higher, closer, straight toward the glowing cannon. "Reyes, pull back!" Hale shouted over comms. "That's suicide." Reyes only laughed, the sound raw and tired. "Then I'll take them with me." The fighter's nose locked on target. The engines roared. Reyes pushed everything into a final burn, the craft screaming as it shot into the heart of the cannon. A flash. Then silence. The alien warship convulsed. The cannon's glow flickered, sputtered, then collapsed inward. The energy backfired, ripping through the ship's core. The sky erupted. The Dominion warship exploded in a storm of fire so bright it turned night into day. Pieces of burning metal rained across the desert, carving craters into the sand. The ground shook with the force of the blast. And then, silence returned. The shadow was gone. The humans stood in the wreckage of their outpost, staring at the falling debris. Their breath came in stunned gasps. Then the realization hit. They had won. Sergeant Hale dropped to his knees, laughing through tears. Velasquez covered her face, whispering Reyes's name. Kaito slumped in his chair, relief flooding his body like a tide. Commander Rourke stood tall, watching the last fragments of the Dominion warship burn out in the sky. His voice was low, steady, but carried through the comms. "No alien lived to tell the tale." The words echoed across the battlefield, a truth carved in blood and fire. And though the cost was high, though the outpost was broken and the dead would never return, humanity had sent its message to the galaxy. They could be attacked. They could be bled. But they could not be broken.